Hi, I'm Antonio Centeno. I'm one of the founders of High Speed Low Drag. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 7 tips to become a better negotiator. Why does this matter? Well, let's just say that most of us, when we were in active duty, when we were in the Marines, we were in the Navy, we were in the Air Force, we didn't learn how to negotiate. It wasn't part of what we did. I mean, let's think about it. Did you ever negotiate for your salary? No. I mean, you just simply looked on a chart and you looked at, okay, this is my time in service, this is my rank, this is how many children I have, I'm married, and I'm in the combat zone, yada, 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 boom, spits out an exact amount that you're going to get paid. And I mean, so there's no negotiating really going on. You could argue in a few places, but it wasn't something we were trained to do. In this video, I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to become a better negotiator, because it does matter. If you can become a better negotiator, you're going to save quite a bit of money. You're going to get what you want and make sure that you don't get taken advantage of. I mean, there's just so many great things about making this a habit. Now, before we get into this too deep, I want to ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. By doing that, these videos come right to you. And if you like this video, would appreciate the like and leave us comments down below. These comments, the likes, all of this stuff, it really actually plays into more men and women finding these videos, which is important because our mission here at High Speed Low Drag is to help the men and women of armed services around the world transition out and actually have success. Get out there in the civilian world and kick butt. Okay, so number one, first thing you got to know about a negotiation is that actually most people are horrible negotiators. It's not that they're maybe horrible, it's just that they have no training, they don't know what they're doing, and they fall for all of these myths. They think that somehow that doing things wrong again and again, they're going to get better. Experience does not make you a better negotiator if you don't know what you're doing. Another thing is people often overestimate their ability. So a lot of people assume they're a decent negotiator when they're actually well below average. Now, why does this matter? Because if you understand that most people aren't very good, then you realize that a small investment, going to a local junior college, taking one of our negotiating courses at High Speed Low Drag, all of a sudden you can start to use this to your advantage. And I'm talking a minimum investment into one course or spending time reading one book, all of a sudden you're going to start to see huge changes, huge improvements, which you'll be able to build off that and then apply everything else and get into this. Because again, I'm talking about this in one video, but believe me, this is a college level course. There are people that this is their entire profession. So tip number 2 in a negotiation is to know yourself. Now, seems pretty broad, pretty general, but you need to understand your wants. You need to understand your needs and know that there is a difference. The key with this is understanding your BATNA. Your BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This word was designed by some really smart guys over at Harvard, and what they figured out is that your BATNA is your safe point. You do not go lower than your BATNA. These are where you've basically identified, you've done your work before, you know that you can't go below this, because you've probably done this in the negotiation. You've gone in unprepared and you ended up getting a deal, and you take a look back and you're like, man, I shouldn't have signed that. I paid too much, or I didn't get everything I wanted. This is a lack of preparation. This is you not knowing yourself and what you needed to get out of that. So, and also knowing, what are your alternatives? Because your BATNA is the alternative. Because a lot of times we focus in on things. As human beings, we're very emotional. So we will focus in on things. I mean, that's great when you're a war fighter and you're out there, and you've got to focus on this. And as human beings in general, we do focus in on things, and this can cost us a lot because we fail to look at all these other things that are important, and we get emotional. Especially with sunk costs. Oftentimes homeowners fall into this. You went on deployment, you came back, you put in all that time and money into rebuilding the house, and all of a sudden you've got new orders to another location, and you want to get your money back on this because you sunk that money into it. But when it comes to a buyer, they don't really care what you put into that house. That's a sunk cost, and you can't get that back. What they're looking at, what is the market value for that home? So again, knowing yourself, having that BATNA, very important. Also, what is your propensity to risk? Some of us can stomach a little bit more risk than others, and you need to pay attention to that stuff. So if you are not the Vegas kind of guy, realize that, okay, that will play into the negotiation, especially when there's a number of unknown factors. So the third thing to pay attention to is understanding the other party in a negotiation. And this is, I've got a kind of an interesting story. We were in Jordan, and I remember one of the captains, he went out there and he wanted to get some really nice rugs. At the time, I'm like, why in the world are you going to spend $1,000 or $2,000 on a rug that's just going to hang on your wall? To me, this, I didn't understand. But what I thought was really smart, why I remember this story, is he actually went out there, he negotiated and basically argued back and forth with the guy at the beginning of the day. He went off, had tea. At the end of the day, he went back to the same merchant and he waited him out. And he stood there till the merchant was closing down. And he walked up and he started negotiating the deal again. Turns out he knew that these particular merchants were, well, they don't like to end the day. It was considered very bad luck to end the day with no sale. And he ended up getting what he wanted, because he understood what the other person wanted, what they needed. He understood what their alternatives was, what they would focus in on. And by understanding the other person, he was able to, he played pretty hardball. And I'm not going to say that was the best way to play it, but it was a one-time deal. And that actually leads us to point number 4, understanding the situation. The example I just used was a one-point deal. But let's think about this. If this was somebody that he was going to have to work again and again with, and this is something we probably saw if you were, I know I was in the infantry battalion, so I would actually see this within, different units. Oftentimes we were fighting, believe it or not, we were fighting over resources. I know you guys in the Army and Air Force, you probably got a lot more, but in the Marine Corps, we didn't have anything. We're the hungry dogs. So oftentimes we're fighting between units for these scarce resources. However, these company commanders, they've got to see each other on a daily basis. They've got to work again in the end. So it wasn't, you had to be careful, because if you burned bridges, all of a sudden, this could come back to bite you. You didn't, in a sense, let's say you didn't upset the supply officer, because he was taking care of you. He was making things happen. So you had to be careful, because negotiations oftentimes were repetitive. They were long-term. Another thing to look at with the situation is, are we talking about scarce resources? Are we dealing with an ideology? So there are certain things, and I know the Marine actually had, this was after I left Iraq, but I know they had actually forces of female Marines that were going in. And this worked out. They understood the situation, that they could actually go in and they could better gather intel from some, basically woman to woman versus, some of us guys actually trying to interrogate or speak with Iraqi women. It just wasn't going to work as well. So they understood the situation and they were able to actually get more out of the negotiation because they understood the situation. Also think about, are you in a situation that you've got to negotiate out of necessity or opportunity? Obviously, if you've got to negotiate out of necessity, you can, in a sense, there's going to probably be more pressure to reach an agreement. And does an agreement actually have to be reached? Is it required? So let's talk about point number 5. And now I'm getting into a little bit more specific tactics, but we're going to talk about, in a sense, making an offer first. So a lot of you guys are out there, you're going to be looking for new jobs, or perhaps you own a company and you have offers coming in, or you're going to be making bidding offers. One of the powerful things is, if you understand yourself, you understand others, you understand the situation, oftentimes you can actually anchor the entire negotiation by making an informative, basically throwing out a very strong anchor at a point that you feel kind of moves the whole table in your direction. And that's a good thing. But again, you've got to be prepared, because if you're not prepared and you throw that out there, you're just throwing random darts out there. And yes, sometimes you can get lucky, but many of the times you're going to end up, missing a point. And so you need to understand the situation before that. But if you don't put something out there, oftentimes the other party will actually throw they'll throw an offer to you, and you got to be careful here, because sometimes they're going to lowball you. Especially, you may get an offer from a company and you're really excited about it. In fact, you really want to work for this company. And all of a sudden you look at that offer and you realize, wow, that's $20,000 less than what I actually have to get. I mean, because you've already done perhaps your BATNA, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I don't even know if I can accept this. I mean, so again, do your homework before, but let's say that they do throw out and they anchor it low. What you immediately want to do is re-anchor it. And this is where you're going to have to come back, and you want to say, okay, You want to help them understand why you can't accept this. You do want to re-anchor. You want to set things back, at least set them back to zero. Now, I'm going to go to point number 6, and this is actually leveraging the power of fairness. And this is something that, you may have a bit of intelligence and know that, okay, my buddy who was a major was hired by this company last year, and he actually received a higher salary than what they're offering me now. So it is something that you can play on the power of fairness. And they've done a number of studies on this, and people really respond well when they know that they're treated fair, but information has to be shared. However, if people are not treated fair, and you need to be careful about this, because if you feel you're being taken advantage of, and if they don't know this, then you could scuttle the entire negotiation, because you could let your emotions play into this. Because we've seen this again and again, and what they've done is they've taken, let's say, a dollar bill. One person divides it and chooses first. The other person can basically nix the entire deal. So he could say, nope, we're not getting anything. So he's got the ultimate veto. What happens is when they go 50-50, the guy that is on the other side, he'll go, okay, that's fair. And especially, he'll even take it if the one guy takes 40 and gives 60. But that rarely happens. Most of the time, they're going 50-50. But what happens whenever they offer 70-30 or 90-10? Well, the person that has the veto oftentimes says, especially as it gets closer to, the more unfair it is, the more likely they are just to say, I'm not taking anything. But let's think about that. Logically, it makes no sense, because even if they got a penny and the other person kept 99, they're still a penny richer. However, it violates our sense of fairness. And that's something that you can use to your advantage but here's the thing, is you're going to need to explain to them why this isn't going to work for you. And this leads to the final point, which is expanding the pie. So in order to expand the pie, you've got to have trust, you've got to have information sharing, you've got to possibly bring in other issues, and you've got to look at possibly even bringing in other parties. But when you do this, you can expand the pie. And let's use the example of the salary. You've been deployed multiple times. You want to see your family. This job right here says it's going to require 50% travel. That is unacceptable to you. And the pay is, the pay is great, but honestly, $120,000 a year, you love that, but you would be willing to take $100,000 a year. You want just to travel less. Maybe the company's focused in on that pay, and they feel, hey, for this amount of pay, we have to justify it, and you have to travel this much. But if you were to come back and say, hey guys, I'll take a salary cut, but honestly, I need to spend more time because my wife's about to have a baby. Well, when they figure that out and you share that information, all of a sudden it's like, you know what? How about the first year you only travel 5 to 10%? But here in 2 years, when we move you up to this position, we're going to need you to do this. And you're also going to take a little bit of a pay cut. However, we'll be able to get you up to a higher pay point if you can then move it up. So what you're doing is you're bringing other things into play. It's not a zero-sum game. When you can expand the pie and bring in other things to negotiate on, you can really find a way to make this work. Perhaps better health care. Getting all of these things can play into it. And what is important to you isn't always necessarily important to the other party. Okay, guys, so hopefully you found this useful. Again, if you want more information, we've got that 101 tips to successfully transition out of the military. Guys, this is for veterans. This is for those of you that are getting out in a year. You're going to find these tips are really useful. Make sure to go over to High Speed Low Drag and to download that. We'll have a link right to it. And that's it, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.